the priest that raped these women in the case. And then why do you keep smiling when I say that?
Because every time you say the word rape, it makes me cringe so hard. And you just keep sprinkling it in through your whole outline.
It's not like I'm doing it on purpose. It's just that's what was happening. Welcome, nerds, to episode 142 of the Nerd You're Looking For podcast, a weekly nerd culture podcast that discusses nerddom through various segments. My name, of course, is Patrick Kuhn, alongside my co-host, as always, that Tyler Hunt. How's it going, man?
It's going really well. How are you?
I'm good. It kind of feels weird recording on Thursday. I think we say this every time we record on Thursday, but it's just weird because we've been reviewing a lot of movies and we will see those movies on Thursday. So it's like normally we'd be sitting in a theater right now watching whatever movie it is that we're about to review, but I refuse to see Pirates 5. So
it's funny because I think that my wife and I are going to see Pirates 5 like at the 10:15 show tonight.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I will be seeing it, but I don't have any type of expectation at all.
It was funny because I was at work today and I had a woman that comes in to my office pretty frequently. So we've kind of gotten to know each other over the last couple of years, and she knows that I'm a big movie buff, and so she'll talk to me about that. But she's definitely one of those people that will basically see anything.
Yeah.
And she's not like, I don't consider myself a pretentious movie fan by any means, but I definitely feel like I have a good eye for certain things. And I've been saying for a long time that I'm not going to see another Pirates of the Caribbean movie. And she came in all excited. She's like, are you going to see the new Pirates of the Caribbean movie? And I was like, and I really, because it's somebody I have to deal with quite often, I didn't want to be like a dick to her.
Yeah.
But I was just like, oh no, I don't think that looks good. Like I was like, I really don't like Pirates. Like other than the first movie was really good. Other than that, I haven't really liked any of them. So I think I'm going to be done with the franchise. She's like, oh man, I really like them, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, nah, like I try to be PC about it. Like if it was just like one of my buddies, I'd be like, fuck that movie. Like get out of my face about it. But I had to be a little bit more PC than I normally would have been. But I kind of felt bad.
Yeah, I had a similar thing happen last week. We were at a coworkers going away thing after work. It was just a few people. And one of the people I don't know as well, I'm not on as close personal terms with as I am with the other people, was talking about how excited she was for Transformers.
Oh, really?
And she has like a son that's really into it. And I mean, it's a whole thing that goes beyond being like a movie critic or anything. And somebody was basically arguing with her that those movies weren't good. And they turned to me and asked me what my opinion was because they know I do the podcast and I watch a lot of movies. And I was like, I was going to stay out of it. I was just going to let you guys argue about it. But I mean, if you're wanting my opinion, it's an abortion of cinema.
Abortion probably would have was a touch too much.
Yeah. But it was her going away thing. So, I mean, she's not at our store anymore. So I didn't feel too bad if I hurt her feelings. But I mean, those movies suck, right? So
yeah.
I
can't even look at the first one the same way.
Just because you know what it turns into.
Yeah, exactly.
That,
I can't get as excited watching that movie anymore because I know where it's going.
I can't remember the last time I even watched it. I don't think that I'll ever. I don't know. The first one, I think that I could stomach it, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, for sure. So every episode, we kind of the first segment that we do is called What We're Into. It's just kind of us checking in with each other. We don't get to have the nerdy conversations that we normally get to have. So what are you into this week?
Silicon Valley is a little over halfway through its fourth season. So I think that I talk about this show yearly. It seems like pretty much anytime it's on, I bring it up on an eventual what I'm into. And I think that that's for good reason because I think that it's one of the best comedies currently on TV. Of course, just my opinion. That being said, it is really hard to believe that this show has been on for nearly 4 years, I guess it would be at this point, because each season is just 10 episodes that are a half hour long. So that means that not much has actually happened in 4 years because, most comedies do 22 episodes and this show's not putting out a lot of content on a yearly basis. I think that that's why they're able to maintain their quality and they continue to tell interesting stories on this show because of that. But, like I said, other shows, they do 30-minute episodes 22 times a year and they really move character arcs forward and plot lines forward, and this show is moving really slow. It doesn't feel like the characters have gone from point A to point B very much because they haven't done a whole lot in the span of 30 or 40 episodes, whatever it's been. So this season, I would say, is definitely one of the funnier seasons so far. There's a lot of funny bits. The episode, I think it was the second or third episode, Dinesh, who is played, I'm not going to be able to pronounce his name, and you might know it because you see him on, I know you watch a lot of late night, and he's frequently a guest on late night talk shows, Kumail, and I don't remember his last name, but
Nanjiani.
Kumail Nanjiani. We'll go with that. There's an episode where he becomes the CEO of Pied Piper, and he has like CEO hair, and he gets really douchey, and it's pretty funny. That episode also, there's some legal issues that come up with their chat software. They have something called Piper Chat, and it's not a big spoiler, so I'll just give away the joke. The joke is like, I guess it's basically a bunch of kids are using it, and they didn't have like an agreements thing whenever people signed up for it. So like they had like this focus group, and it's a bunch of 11-year-olds, and then there's like one guy in it, and it's like in his 50s, and it's kind of a pedophile. So it's a long setup for just a pedophile joke, but it really was pretty funny watching the characters deal with that, and what ends up happening with that, the resolution of that is equally as funny. So that was one of the highlights of the season so far. But of course, one of the reasons that this show works so well is because it has an amazing ensemble cast. The main Pied Piper group in particular, they fire on all cylinders and play really well off each other. I would say what drew me to this show initially was TJ Miller, of course, who plays Eric Bachman. But I've really grown to like the whole cast quite a bit. I talked about Kumail Nanjiani. I hadn't heard of him before this show, and he's probably one of my favorite parts. Of course, Thomas Middleditch plays the typical Silicon Valley nerd really well. As Martin Starr is in it, who's in a lot of Seth Rogen, Judd Apatow stuff in smaller roles, and he's great. But I would say the character that I really like the most, and the actor I really liked the most out of the show, was actually the person I was most familiar with going into it, and that's Zach Woods, who played Gabe on The Office. He plays Jared, and his character is just hilarious. He deadpans so well on that show, and he makes me laugh every episode. So that's definitely my favorite character so far. So definitely love this show. I think that there is a holdback of it being listed as one of the all-time great comedies. It's not due to the cast, obviously, because there's a lot of talent there. So I think that there are some episodes where the writing could be a bit stronger to kind of put it into that upper echelon category of all time. Probably could do a little bit more with character development as well. But all in all, this show definitely has legs, and I don't think enough people actually talk about it because it is a really fun show that I obviously like quite a bit.
Yeah, I think I've watched the first 2 seasons.
Oh, I didn't realize you had started it.
Yeah, I like it. It's funny. I just I think I definitely agree with you as far as the writing's concerned. It could definitely be a lot better. I just feel like it's the same thing over and over again. They find some new problem, and then they find some radical solution to that problem, and it's just over and over again. I mean, I guess this is a problem I have with all sitcoms, because you get that a lot. But it's just like, oh, they're not in any real pressing danger of anything, because I know that they're going to figure it out eventually. So
the writing on the show, like, it seems every season they get into a deeper and deeper hole. Yeah. And then like the last episode, they're like, oh, we found a resolution, and then there's a cliffhanger. Yeah. And I definitely agree. It's the same thing over and over. I would like to eventually, I thought that the way that the show was headed was that we would see Pied Piper take off, and it'd be about them building this company, but it seems like
it's never going to take off.
They always get knocked down to, level 1. They always get knocked down to the beginning, and they start something new, and that's a bit frustrating, I think.
It's not a show that I've like, okay, I watched the first 2 seasons. I'm not going to watch anymore. Like, I'm done with it. It's nothing like that. I do enjoy it. It's just not something that I'm like clamoring to watch.
Yeah. All right, dude. What are you into?
Well, I'm into a new Netflix true documentary series called The Keepers. I was sold on this because somebody told me it was like the new Making a Murderer. And I actually think it's a little bit more like Spotlight meets Making a Murderer. But I don't think it's quite successful as either one of those things. And I wasn't a huge fan of Spotlight either. Basically, it's about a 50-year-old cold case of a murder of a nun, Sister Kathy Jesnick. I think that's probably not how you pronounce her name. I only heard them say her name like a million times, and I still messed it up. She was a teacher in the 60s at a all-girls Catholic school. And obviously, throughout the course of this documentary, they find out that there was a controversy with the school. One of the counselors was molesting these girls. I don't even know what you would classify as molesting. He was just raping them. He was just finding excuses to call them to his office and raping them. Not just that, but he was like also like whoring them out to other people. And it gets really, really fucked up. It's a really interesting story, but I don't think that the documentary itself was put together very well. I kind of wanted to give the filmmakers the benefit of the doubt and say, well, this is a cold case and there's a lot of information and they want you to be as frustrated as some of these people trying to investigate it. But I just think that they just didn't put it together very well. Like, I want to give them a benefit of the doubt and say that they did this on purpose. But at the same time, it was only 7 episodes, but even that felt like it was too many. There was a lot of info and they just, like, for long stretches of time, like there was an entire episode where it was just about this guy raping these girls. And then at the end of the episode, they mentioned the nun again. I was like, oh yeah, that's what we're actually watching, was them investigating this murder. Now, of course, they make the claim that she found out about this and she tried to put a stop to it. And that's why she was murdered. And that's the connection that they try to make. But a lot of the show isn't about her. It's about him, which makes sense. It's this huge thing. It ended up being a lawsuit in 92, I think, if I remember correctly. So they go into basically an entire episode and a half, I think, was just about that court case, which is fine, but it didn't really get us any closer to where I thought they were going to go at the beginning, which was following these 2 women that are investigating the murder of their old school teacher. It went long stretches where they weren't really discussing what I thought that they were supposed to be discussing at the beginning. And then there was also, they thought at the beginning when they started this documentary that maybe this other murder that happened really similar or about the same time as the nun was connected. And they kind of talked a little bit, and I think it was the first or maybe the second episode, about how they might have been connected, and then they never talk about that until like maybe the last episode again. I was like, oh yeah, that's right, that's who that lady is that they made that. It was really just, there was so much information because they filmed this over like the course of like 10 years. Like, it was a ton of information, rightfully so, because it was kind of a pretty messed up case. But again, I just don't think that it was put together all as a documentary, even though it was 7 episodes. I just didn't think they put it all together very well. It's definitely a compelling case. My wife kept saying, she's like, I would just wish that these 2 women, because it's just these 2 women, they're not policemen, they're not anything. Like, they were like, this shouldn't be the case. Like, she was a good woman, she was a good teacher, somebody should solve her case, her murder, and they just kind of set out to do it themselves. My wife was like, they should have their own show. Like, I would watch them just investigating cases, because they were really kind of funny together and they had a good dynamic. But there was, especially towards the end of the documentary, there was very little of them in it. It was mostly about the priest that raped these women in the case. And then, why do you keep smiling when I say that?
Because every time you say the word rape, it makes me cringe so hard. And you just keep sprinkling it in through your whole outline.
It's not like I'm doing it on purpose. It's just that's what was happening. But yeah, so it was a definitely compelling case. I will say that it's an interesting documentary, but it just wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I started this today and I only watched like half of the first episode. It did not capture my attention like Making a Murderer did from the get-go, but it's only 7 episodes, so I'm sure I'll finish it. And I'm kind of curious to see how they piece things together. The whole molestation thing is a bit of a spoiler alert, but that's okay.
I don't think so, because it literally the second episode is when they bring it up. And they said it in the thing.
Well, they already started talking about like this teacher. I'm assuming this is the teacher that they've brought up already. So that was doing it. So
he was the counselor at this school, but yeah,
over whatever. So,
same thing, tomato.
I don't know. I was half paying attention. I don't know. And I'm glad that you could bring it up and probably break the record that we've had on the podcast for most use of the word rape in one episode.
A record that I plan on breaking. All right, so our next segment is just plainly called Comics. Tyler and I read a ton of comics each week, and we like to spotlight one or two. So what'd you read this week?
So this week was a light week. I know that you will probably talk about it as well. You didn't even have enough to do a new comic book day video, but it was a light week for me as well. So I'll talk about one of the few books I picked up, which is Infamous Iron Man number 8. And I have talked about this book, I believe, once already. And if you recall, I've been conflicted on it a little bit. If you don't remember what it's about, or if you're not sure what Infamous Iron Man is about, the basic synopsis is that in Tony Stark's absence, Victor Von Doom takes up the mantle of Iron Man. He's basically had a change of heart since Secret Wars, which was a while ago at this point. He had all of the power that he had ever wanted. He had strived to get throughout his character's, creation, and it did nothing for him. So he's kind of had a change of heart, and he's playing the hero role now. So all that being said, you could probably see why I am conflicted on it. It's possibly Marvel's biggest villain. It could be argued that he's Marvel's biggest villain, and he basically has a change of heart and becomes Iron Man, which is a bit of a stretch. It would be like, from the DC point of view, if the Joker decided he was going to have a change of heart and becomes Green Lantern or something. He joins the Green Lantern Corps. It's just a weird, absurd thing. That being said, after 8 issues, I'm starting to come around a little bit. The comic I've mentioned before is written by Brian Bendis, who's written Iron Man for quite a while now, and I believe that he's done a really good job of humanizing Victor Von Doom and showing the struggle that he's been facing, being a reformed villain trying to do good. Just as I start to buy in, though, something happened that pulled me out of it a little bit. So in this issue in particular, issue 8, Reed Richards comes back, and he has a meeting with Ben Grimm, the Thing, and he basically tells the Thing that he needs to kill Dr. Doom. And he kind of has had this looming presence in the comic so far. Like, I think he showed up in like issue 4. I could be wrong, but he showed up a few issues ago, but this is the first time that he makes his presence known. And it's the first time that he's interacted with a character so involved with the plot. So Ben Grimm is surprised to see Reed Richards alive, and he asks if Sue Storm is still alive, and Richards says she's alive and doesn't know that he's there. And I didn't finish the last Fantastic Four book that they did, so I'm not quite sure what the falling out was and why Ben Grimm was surprised to see these characters alive. Was it the Fantastic Four book, or was it Secret Wars?
I want to say it was Secret Wars.
Okay, because I didn't finish that because it was garbage.
I'm not.
I was gonna let that marinate for a second.
We're not gonna have that argument again.
Perfect. So they're playing it up that maybe it's not the real Reed Richards, because he like goes through this elaborate story to prove to the Thing that he is the real Reed Richards, and it doesn't seem like he'd be the character to give instructions to kill Victor Von Doom. I mean, they've been battling for 60 years in comics now, but I'm really hoping that this leads up to some kind of twist within the comic. I understand that with characters like the Fantastic Four and with Dr. Doom, it's probably hard to keep things fresh because they're 50, 60 years old at this point. But I feel like Marvel's not getting the full potential out of its biggest villain. And the book's kind of an enigma at this point, but I'm pretty invested also by issue 8. So I'm definitely going to hang on and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, you've talked about this book before, and I've made the comparison to the Superior Spider-Man, so I don't necessarily need to do that again. I do kind of like those change of heart type of books, even though I do agree with you that it's kind of hard to imagine Dr. Doom having that change of heart. because I just think it brings out that a side of a character that you don't normally get to see. But since I've already seen it with Superior Spider-Man, this book really doesn't interest me all that much.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to keep going just to see what happens, but I don't know if they'll be able to rectify it all by the time this book's over.
All right.
So, what'd you read?
So, like you mentioned, there was no new comic book day video this week. There was actually only one comic that came out that I was planning on picking up, and I'm still planning on picking up, and that's Elektra. But I still needed a book to discuss on here, so I was kind of just browsing Comixology as I do from time to time, and I figured if nothing caught my eye, I would just go ahead and talk about something that I picked up a few weeks ago or whatever. But something luckily did catch my eye. It was another Boom Studios book. I talked about a couple episodes ago, Godshaper, and how I really liked that. They're kind of known, Boom Studios is, for their comic book adaptations of popular movies like Planet of the Apes or Escape from New York and so on and so forth. So I really kind of am intrigued when I see something that is an original property. And the book that I'm going to talk about is called Victor LaVallee, who is the author and creator of this book, Destroyer. And what kind of caught my eye, not initially, but the more I read about it, was it's a new take on Frankenstein. When I first read that, I was like, I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit because we've seen that a million times. Everything that's ever like big franchises, especially with horror, we see a new take and they never ever work. So I kind of rolled my eyes, but I kept reading, and I'm kind of glad I did because this book actually ended up being pretty cool. Basically, the concept is that Frankenstein's monster is still alive, but went into hiding, and there's like this big government conspiracy to try to catch him. So when he comes out of hiding, that the government agency that's been trying to catch him comes out. There's also kind of another story that's actually the Frankenstein's monster is kind of the B story. The big story, or the A story in this book, is Frankenstein actually has a descendant, and this woman lost her son. We don't really know why or how she lost her son, but she kind of uses her knowledge, being the descendant of Frankenstein, to bring him back. And that's the big cliffhanger at the end of this issue. And we've talked about before on past episodes kind of the struggles of number one issues, especially number one issues like this, which are a completely original property and concept, and kind of what the creative team of these books have to do to make that number one issue successful. For me, it can't have a ton of exposition, but it has to have enough to kind of set the stage, especially with a new universe and a new world that they're creating. We have to know enough about it so we can have the knowledge for future issues, but it has to have enough action to keep readers' attention and some mystery for further issues. You can't just completely blow your load in that first issue, especially if it's going to be an ongoing series and not a miniseries. And I think this book definitely has all of those things. There's a really cool Frankenstein's monsters action piece at the very beginning that I thought was kind of caught my attention immediately. The monster looks cool, but he's definitely a little bit different than the stereotypical Frankenstein's monster that you think of from the movie. He kind of looks like a bit of a hobo, which is weird, but it's also different. Like, I didn't want that same monster that you always see. So I thought that was kind of cool. The government conspiracy kind of provides the mystery, but also just a little bit about the descendant's son. You're not quite sure how he died, but you know that he is dead. So there's a little bit more mystery there. I'm really, really surprised at how much I like this book. At first, it kind of, to be honest with you, just was an excuse for me to talk about something different that I had never talked about on this podcast. And I was just like, even if it's bad, I'm just going to read one issue and I'll be done with it. But I think I'm going to keep going with it. I liked it so far.
Yeah, this sounds interesting. I like the Frankenstein mythos, and I don't feel like it's been done well enough. So
For sure.
It's cool that this book exists, that it's actually piqued my interest a little bit, something I might look into.
Yeah, I would suggest
it's called
it.
Destroyer?
Well, it's technically called Victor LaVallee's Destroyer, but yes, that's what it's called.
All right, Victor LaVallee, come on.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty pretentious, especially because I may be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure this is his first comic book. So it's not even like I've never heard the name, so I don't know if he's just like a known commodity in like the writing world or what. Obviously, he had to have something to be able to put his name on the front of the cover like that, but whatever. Like in Comixology, it's under the V's.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, what a cocky bitch.
Yeah.
All right, you ready for nerd news?
For sure. What do you have this week?
Let's see. So you asked before we started recording, hey, you got anything good for nerd news? And I was like, I sure don't. So that kind of
Sums it up.
Yeah, sums up where we're going with this. So we'll bust out a couple of the headlines, but nothing too crazy. So Arnold Schwarzenegger is going to come back for the Terminator.
I wasn't even aware that. I mean, I guess we had talked a few episodes ago about maybe it going back to James Cameron.
Yeah, so it's going to revert back to James Cameron, and he's going to produce and help create a new Terminator movie with Tim Miller directing. So the big, we've obviously seen some shitty Terminator movies in the last 10, 15 years. And the big news was like, hey, James Cameron's going to have some creative control over this, so we might be reverting back to some good storytelling. And then you say Arnold Schwarzenegger is going to come back, and I just don't see how you can do it any differently at this point than what Genesis did. And Genesis was a pile of garbage. So you can't put a 70-year-old man in these movies and have it make sense from that perspective, in my opinion. So I don't know. I think that I'm just going to kind of give up any hope that I had when I learned that James Cameron was getting the rights back at this point.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I remember reading something, and I might be misquoting him, so I apologize for that. But I remember him saying something to the effect when discussing the Alien franchise that he was like, there's not a whole lot you can do with that franchise anymore. He's like, we kind of told the good stories and that's it, which was super douchebaggy of him to say.
He seems like
sure.
A huge douche.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I just think it's funny because then you turn to a franchise that's essentially his, and he's trying to still milk out the last little drops of it. I just thought it was kind of shitty for him to, on one hand, say that shitty thing about the Alien franchise, which he may or may not be wrong. I did like Alien Covenant, and Ridley Scott, by all means, has the right to continue the franchise. But for him to say that and then go right back to making his Terminator franchise, trying to basically recapture the glory, which is exactly what the Alien franchise is trying to do, is pretty shitty and hypocritical.
Not only that, how do you tell, what is he doing, like 4 or 5 sequels to Avatar?
Yeah,
like,
I'll believe that when I fucking see it.
I mean, for sure, but how do you even have 4 to 5 stories to tell in that fucking universe?
You don't. I mean, he didn't have one because it's just Dances with Wolves.
Exactly.
South Park summed that up perfectly.
Exactly. So I don't know that what he's saying makes a lot of sense. So Universal has named the Universal Monster Universe. They're calling it the Dark Universe, which is super awful. But the news there that piqued my interest was that they are going to be releasing Bride of Frankenstein in 2019, and Javier Bardem is playing Frankenstein's monster. And I had no idea you were talking about that comic, so that it's not a purposeful tie-in, but they are also still doing the Invisible Man with Johnny Depp as well. So I want everything that I see to be amazing and be good. Like, I don't go into a movie hoping it's bad, but if you listen to our Rotten Tomatoes film draft, you know that neither one of us have high expectations for The Mummy.
No.
So I'll be curious to see if this entire universe they're talking about building comes crashing down whenever The Mummy potentially flops.
Yeah, I'm excited for The Invisible Man. I'm excited to see a Johnny Depp movie that Johnny Depp's not actually in. I think that would be fantastic. But no, I mean, The Mummy's not going to be good at all. Like, I mean, there's just nothing in that movie that makes it look good. And you know what is the most disappointing about that movie? Can you guess? The fact that it comes out on my birthday, and that's the movie that I'm going to go see on my birthday. Like, I always go see a movie, no matter what is out right then. I always end up seeing a movie on my birthday, and that'll be the movie that I see on my birthday, and that bums me out because it looks really, really stupid.
Maybe you'll go in with no expectations, and you'll find some kind of enjoyment.
You know, I want to keep like some kind of expectations, not necessarily even expectation, but maybe optimism that I'll go in with that same attitude that I kind of went into with the Great Wall, and ultimately I was disappointed with that movie because it wasn't good and it really wanted to be good, but maybe I will get what I wanted to get out of the Great Wall out of the Mummy, maybe. But it's even disappointing. I'm not a big Tom Cruise fan, but I am a Jake Johnson fan, and he's in that movie. I don't know why, and I forget that he's in that movie until that weird one-liner thing that in the trailer that he has to do, and it's just exposition. That's all that is. It's just him just screaming exposition at Tom Cruise. Yeah. But and then what's her name from Kingsman?
Yeah,
she's the Mummy, and I hate that. I like that they're kind of changing it a little bit from the the typical man as the mummy monster. I like that they're trying to change that a little bit, but yeah, she's wasted in this movie for sure.
I saw this funny meme the other day. It was Tom Cruise. It was like a promotional picture for, I think, Jack Reacher, but it's basically just generic picture of him in a leather jacket on a motorcycle. It's like upcoming photo of every Tom Cruise movie ever. Yeah. And I think that's a pretty good summation. Like he does, I like Tom Cruise, I really do, but he doesn't have a lot of range, and he kind of plays the same guy in every movie. So it's kind of like, what's his name in Ethan Hunt. So it's basically Ethan Hunt versus the Mummy. There's nothing different about his character. So I'm curious why he signed on to it, and I'm curious why they went after him. But we'll see if this actually does spin out into the dark universe.
I'm also curious how he got out of that body bag. That zipper doesn't go both ways. How does he get out of that body bag? I'm almost
Mummy magic.
Intrigued to see this movie, and ultimately I will. I'm sure we're going to review it, but just to try to figure out how he got out of that fucking body bag.
Hopefully all your questions are answered. Tom Holland has been cast as Nathan Drake in an Uncharted movie, which has been long gestating. I guess they're going a prequel to the game route.
Okay.
So it's going to be like this. Things happened obviously before the game started, and I've never played Uncharted games. I have watched I watched my roommate at one time play a few of them, and I would say that if I were to ever get a PlayStation, it would be to play. These would be like top of the list games that I would want to go back and play, because I heard they're amazing. They look amazing, and they look like they tell a cool narrative. But I'm definitely down with Tom Holland playing Nathan Drake. It seems like the better alternative that was going to be Mark Wahlberg for a long time attached to that role.
I thought Chris Pratt was in talks to do it as well.
I think he's in talks to play every action hero ever, pretty much after Guardians. So I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, I actually have decided that I'm going to get a PlayStation 4 for my birthday. Again, I didn't mean for that to be another plug. Hey, my birthday's coming up. I didn't mean for that to happen. But so I'm going to get the Uncharted bundle. I've already decided that. So nice. I think it's Uncharted 4 is the bundle that I'm going to get. So I will have at least played that game before this movie comes out.
Nice. That's awesome. And last thing is a bit of a bummer, but I thought I'd bring it up. Zack Snyder had to step away from Justice League, like finishing up the movie over the next 6 or 7 months, because I guess in March his daughter committed suicide, which is awful. And he's got, I think the article said he had 7 other kids, which blew my mind. But he has to, he mentioned needing to be there for them, and he thought going back to work would be therapeutic, but it's proving to be harder than he thought it'd be. And so Joss Whedon is going to finish up, I guess, any tasks that are left on the movie. So kind of a strange story. Like, I've never heard of anything happening like that with such a big budget movie, but obviously pretty sad circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really sad. And I thought on one side, I don't like the DC universe, but I mean that you have to put that aside when it's a story like that. And I hated the fact that there was some people that couldn't compartmentalize that.
Yeah.
I saw some horrible things like, oh, well, maybe the movies will be good now. Who gives a shit about the movie? Like, seriously, put your life in perspective, like get a grip on reality or whatever you want to say. Like, seriously, it's just a movie. As much as we love these characters, it's nothing compared to your family. And
he even said it in his statement. He was like something along the lines of he didn't want to even make this. He didn't think he would have to make this public, but he knew what the chatter would be if it was the headline was just Zack Snyder steps away from Justice League, Joss Whedon taking over. Like, I would like to say that we wouldn't do it, but if that was the headline,
I mean, if there was no other information,
I mean, we'd be on the podcast talking about like, oh, it's in trouble. They want Joss Whedon because he's obviously a better filmmaker, this and that. So it's a shame, I guess, that that's kind of the culture that we have with upcoming movies, especially with properties that we care a lot about. So, I guess that's it. I'll be curious to. I wouldn't think at this point there'd be much left.
No, I mean that comes out later this year. I mean, there's so much post production on those types of movies that's probably most of what he's doing right now. Anyways,
I would say like the only say you're having is just how putting some effects together at this point.
How everything looks as far as the effects and stuff like that. So, I mean, the filming, I'm almost positive is done, right?
Unless they
reshoots.
We're doing some reshoots. That's
which again, big budget movies, they plan for that stuff. So that's not a thing.
That's not a thing either. So we'll see. We'll see what ends up coming out in November. I'm curious how they'll bill it, if they'll bill it as both of them directing it, or if they'll just give it to Zack Snyder because he did most of the legwork or what. But
I think some legality is probably involved. I'm sure he'll get some kind of credit for directing it. That's whatever portion it is. Like I said, most of it's probably post-production at this point. But I mean, it's super, super sad. I mean, obviously, you wish him the best. I hope the movie's good because I hope every movie that I ever watch is good.
Yep.
And especially a comic book movie. But I mean, I'm kind of almost rooting for this movie more because I kind of hope him the best now.
Yeah.
I mean, not that I didn't already, but it's just like a super sad.
I mean, be honest, you didn't already.
Well, I mean, I have my problems with some of his other movies, obviously, but I don't feel like that's the time to bring it. This is the time to bring it back up.
For sure. So that is all I have for Nerd News.
Okay, so we've been reviewing a lot of movies, and that's, I mean, let's be honest, that's what we kind of do on the podcast, but we can review other things, and
don't put us in a corner.
I'm saying for the most part, that's what we do.
Not you, I'm talking about our listeners. I'm getting
so now you're berating getting super, super aggressive.
Yes.
You're getting aggressive. I said rape a lot of times. Let's pump the brakes. Anyways, so you probably already know that we are not reviewing Pirates 5. We are definitely not reviewing Baywatch, even though I think I might actually see that this weekend.
It's got like a 17% on
I don't care. I have free passes to the movies this weekend, so I don't give a shit. Anyways, we are going to be reviewing Injustice 2, which came out a couple of weeks ago. It came out on May 16th. It was developed by NetherRealm Studios, which is the studios that does the Mortal Kombat games. It was directed by Ed Boon, who with John Tobias actually created the Mortal Kombat franchise. It follows the DC comic universe shattered following the events of the first game as the heroes try to pull themselves together to fight a greater threat. I'm sure I've talked about this before on the podcast, but I love fighting games. I grew up on Mortal Kombat. My iPhone wallpaper is actually just like the lock screen just says keep calm and finish him, and it has the Mortal Kombat symbol on it. Like, I love those games. I really enjoyed the first Injustice game. I actually kind of wish I had replayed it. Like, I thought of that like as the second game was coming out. I was like, oh man, I'm doing these Let's Play videos on the story. Like, it would have been really cool if I was a little bit more refreshed on it. I really enjoyed it, but like I said, it's been a couple of years since I played it. I was a little bit fuzzy on the story, but as I kind of went through the second one, it kind of rejogged my memory on it. I really liked it. The first one, that Superman was kind of ultimately the bad guy in it.
Yeah.
I definitely thought that was an interesting Superman story. I don't think the character's all that interesting. I actually thought that this was one of the more interesting stories involving that character that I've seen. I realized playing these games that I really don't know that much about the DC comic universe. Like, really just kind of know about Batman and a few others. And so playing these games, I do get kind of embarrassed. I don't know who that person is or that person. So I don't get as many references in these games as I would in a Marvel game, obviously. But I've been really looking forward to this game. I think ultimately, I mean, we'll get into all the other particulars, but I think it had a strong story, not quite as strong as the first game. And the mechanics could kind of be a little bit improved upon.
Yeah, so I also enjoyed the first game quite a bit, but I never really sank much time into it. I just basically played it for its story, because I don't really get into fighting games too much, not like you do, especially. The gameplay with fighting games typically loses my interest because, in my opinion, I don't think that there's too much you can do with the format. This game suffers from that pitfall a little bit, but pound for pound, kind of blowing my load here, I would say this is the best fighting game I've ever played.
Okay.
I think that there's tons of content, and I've played close to 24 hours at this point, and it's still fresh to me. I'm still enjoying it, still enjoying the gameplay, still enjoying the different things that we'll talk about throughout the review. So I am pretty pleased with Injustice 2.
I grew up on Mortal Kombat, so I'm actually kind of used to not only fighting games, but I'm kind of used to the slower, methodical kind of approach to the fighting games. I know that Injustice, the first one, kind of got some shit about. I know some gamers said that it was too slow. I know that like Marvel versus Capcom and some other games, it's kind of just like epileptic seizure, like on screen. Like it's the characters are always doing something. And I do enjoy those games, don't get me wrong, but I prefer Mortal Kombat because it's a little bit more methodical. I feel like it's kind of like a thinking man's fighting game. Like I like to string combos together and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I feel like when you have a slower game like that, you can kind of do that. And even though button mashing in fighting games is a huge problem, with the slower games, it's not that much of a problem because you can't go that quickly in these games. So you still give the other character time to react to it. And I think that skill wins out in these games more often than not. Now, unfortunately, they did speed up the gameplay in this sequel, but they didn't overcompensate. Like I think they heard some of the complaints about it being too slow, and I think they sped it up just a tad bit, but I don't think they overcompensated, and I think it actually worked. Like I don't mind it. Like I can kind of feel that it's a little bit quicker than Mortal Kombat X was, but not too much. So I did appreciate that a little bit. They did tweak it a little bit. Like I said, it is a cool story. Not quite as strong as the first one, but at the end of the day, it's still a fighting game. So if the game itself, like if the mechanics aren't smooth, then the game kind of falls apart. So I do really like that, that these games are made from that studio that it was basically built from the ground up because of a fighting game. So they definitely know what they're doing. But that they also kind of listened to the fans and sped it up a little bit, but they didn't overcompensate. So it didn't feel like a completely different game. So yeah.
Cool.
All right, so let's just dive right into the story. I feel like I've already said this like 4 or 5 times. I really like the first story a lot better. I feel like they kind of blew their load a little bit with the first story. I don't know if they necessarily foresaw that they were going to see or they were going to have another game to make. Like, I really thoroughly enjoyed the first game story quite a lot. Like, normally when you get these fighting games, the story is just kind of just an excuse to get these two characters fighting. Like it's just like the cutscenes are just that kind of that glue that holds the fighting game together. And in the first game, it felt like you were actually playing a real movie.
Yeah.
And I really would have liked to see this be Batman v Superman, like that type of story.
Yeah.
I think would have worked a lot better in that movie than what they ultimately did. Unfortunately, like I said, they kind of blew their load with that first story. And I'm really kind of tired of seeing the Superman Krypton story line. Like all these movies and TV shows kind of trying to change it up a little bit. This was essentially the story of Injustice 2 was essentially Man of Steel again, except for it wasn't General Zod, basically.
Yeah.
And so that was a little bit disappointing. I don't really need to see that again. Like I said, in the first story or in the first game, the story was kind of Superman was ultimately a bad guy. I mean, he was driven to that by the Joker, which of course I liked because that's a strong Batman character. So I appreciated that. But in this, it just kind of went back to more your conventional Superman story. And I was a little bit bummed about that. But like I said, the story ultimately in a fighting game is not all that important. I just kind of wish it was a little bit better.
Yeah, so I like the story of the first Injustice game quite a bit too. I think it's an amazing what if story, and there's
for sure
like comic series following that for the last few years since that came out, 2013. So obviously it had legs on it as well. So for me, the story in this game is probably the weakest part of the game.
Absolutely,
And
for sure.
I think that it's a typical pitfall with fighting games. The first game involved like the DC multiverse quite a bit, and the multiverses, and it was the culmination of that game. It was good versus bad Superman, and that was kind of cool. So I'm glad that they decided to leave this one in its one universe, because while I think the idea of the multiverse in the DC is cool, like I think that if you would have made it like, oh, here comes the good guys from Earth whatever in this game, it would have just been too played out. So I like that they left it in this one universe, but because they did that, a lot of it felt really forced. And when they have to involve characters in this game that are really well known, it feels even more forced to me. So like an example of that would be Harley Quinn and Batman being on the same side. Like I know that it's justified through the first game and it's justified through their efforts in this game, but it still, just being a DC fan and being a Batman fan, like you mentioned, doesn't feel right to me.
So I want to interrupt you real quick, just because I don't want to forget about this. So this may be the worst Joker I've ever seen.
Yeah,
right. It's horrible. The excuse to get him in this game was horrible, just so he could be a playable character, and his character's fucking garbage.
I didn't like playing him in the first game. I don't like playing him in this game. I don't understand. I get that the Joker's top 5 DC characters. Like you want to put name recognition in this game so people buy it, but you don't need the Joker in this game.
No.
He does nothing for this game. He looks awful, his gameplay is awful, and he's basically got a cameo in the story that justifies him being in it, like you said. So I definitely agree that was one of the story arcs in this campaign that was really forced. One of the other story arcs I do really like, though, is Supergirl's story arc. I know you said that you were kind of tired of the Krypton stuff, but I have grown to like the Supergirl character quite a bit, and I thought that she was kind of a cool antagonist to Superman once they get to that point. I thought that the idea of using Brainiac as the main villain was smart, because I would say he's one of the DC's more menacing villains, and it makes sense the way that the story progresses that you would need these characters to kind of come together. But I also like how it spins into multiple endings that I won't, of course, spoil, but basically lets you decide to pick how the game ends. That was a lot of fun too. But in the end, it was a pretty weak storyline. A lot of cheesy dialogue that made me roll my eyes really hard. Yeah.
The Green Arrow stuff wasn't horrible, but his one-liners were kind of cringeworthy at times.
Yeah, his one-liners are bad, but when you go into the characters fighting and they go off of each other, some of it's really cool and some of it's kind of
the clashes. Like I love that the clashes are different. Well, some of them are different depending on the character.
Yeah, but there's some that are pretty bad.
Oh yeah.
So they don't hit on all cylinders, but definitely the weakest part of the game, but like by no means unplayable or anything. Like you can get through it.
Oh yeah, for sure. So obviously after the story and broad strokes, the segments that we're going to do is going to be a lot different than our movie or TV reviews. So the next segment that we're going to talk about is gameplay. And for me, there are some nitpicks, but for the most part, the gameplay is nearly flawless. Like, it's just a fantastic fighting game. You can tell that this was made by people that made their living making fighting games. Like I said, they listened to the fans and sped up the gameplay a little bit, but it does not take away hardly at all being able to string together some really cool combos, mostly because the environmental stuff I just absolutely love. Like, I get hard just thinking about it. Bouncing people off like just like the background and having them pop back out to you, and you can uppercut them and string together even a longer combo. So I really, really love that kind of stuff. The clashes that we've already kind of brought up a little bit, and area transitions are really cool. They kind of keep the combat fresh, even though the clashes can be a little bit irritating. It seems like the AI initiates clashes a lot.
Yeah,
I don't think it's coincidence that they happen to initiate it right after I pull my super move. So that's a little bit irritating. Speaking of the super moves, they are very, very cool. to a certain point. I think at a certain point, once you see them for the first time, I think there should be a way that you can skip them, like still pull them off and they still hurt that particular character. However, I don't need to see them every time. Now, Tyler, you actually sent me a link the other day that brought to my attention that there's actually a way to hurt the character even more.
Yeah.
So your super move actually hurts them. Like they'll hit them every once in a while during the animation. And apparently if you time a certain button correctly, it actually provides more damage to them. So I guess there's a reason why you can't skip them, but at the same time, I still think that there should be a function in the game that you can choose to even forego that and just go ahead and skip it, especially if it's at the very end of the fight and you're just doing it and that person's gonna be done after the end of it anyways. So yeah, the super moves are really cool, and actually that's gonna be part of my nerd favorite. Spoiler alert, we're gonna talk about our favorite super moves, but I kind of just wish that you could skip them. Now the gear system, the way that you can unlock all this new gear seems really cool. They started doing this with the Mortal Kombat games with the Crypt, but that was more like especially in the earlier games when they first had it, it was more like just like concept art and stuff like that. But I love that the gear actually changes the caliber of player, like the caliber of fighter. Like it actually changes the game, and so that sucks you in just immediately. Like with the Crypt in the old Mortal Kombat games, and they got better about it as the games progress, but the Crypt was just almost like just that collector aspect of me. It was just like being a big Mortal Kombat fan. I wanted to open up all the Crypts because I was a big fan, but I didn't really get much out of it other than that. But I really love that they kind of took it to a new level with this game, and it's almost kind of like their answer to all these like Call of Duty and Destiny and all these other games that have like these huge multiplayer aspects to them where you can unlock all this different stuff, and that's kind of their answer to it. And so I love that they finally kind of took that next step with the gear system.
Yeah, I mean they've crammed tons of clothing, armor, colors, etc. to customize characters, which adds a great factor that I don't play as many fighting games as you, so it's the first time I've kind of seen stuff like that. So that's definitely cool. All that being said, I still feel as though you can dress it up a million different ways, but it's still just this character versus this character in a one-on-one match. And when you have 10 to 12 maps, it does get a little repetitive. So that is one of the downfalls of the game, in my opinion. Not necessarily just for this game, just fighting games in general. That being said, it's definitely still, like I said, the strongest fighting game I've ever played. Definitely the best mechanics of any fighting game I've ever played. Everything just flows so well. There is a learning curve, in my opinion, so it's not too incredibly easy. But once you put in your time with a character, you can feel yourself getting better and learning, which is cool to do within a game, especially a game like this. And just to touch on the super moves, like you were saying, there's so much individuality brought to each character. So like their fighting type and their demeanor, you can't just jump from character to character and use the same strategies, especially on harder difficulties or in multiplayer, and that applies to the super moves as well because they're so individualized to each character. And like you said, I have a love-hate relationship with them because I think a lot of them are pretty cool. But I mentioned I put close to 24 hours into this game. After that much and after you've seen them all, you get pretty tired of seeing it. And sometimes you see them multiple times in a match and it's a bit much. So I also agree that I wish there was a way to skip that.
For sure. So our next segment is just we're going to talk about the game modes. For me, there's really only, there's plenty of different types of nuances to this game, but for me, there's really only two main game modes, and that is the story, which we've already kind of touched on. So we won't go too much into it. Like I said, again, for the 100th time, it was stronger in the first game. Again, familiar with the Mortal Kombat games, so you kind of know how they do this story. The cutscenes kind of glue everything together, and it's just kind of an excuse to get these characters together and fighting. There's really not a whole lot to the story mode other than that. You watch this cutscene, you're basically they break it down into chapters, and so each chapter you're a particular character, and one game or one thing that they may have changed. It's been a while since I played the first one, but this one you can actually, there's certain chapters where you can choose which fighter you are, and that's an achievement. I haven't quite gotten there yet, but I'm going to make my way back and circle back and play the characters that I didn't choose originally. So that's kind of a little extra added replay value, but basically you just watch the cutscene until they give you an excuse to fight this guy. Then you fight him, and then you see another cutscene, and it just kind of goes on and on. So that's how the Mortal Kombat games did their story. They did have this one weird, like, open world story at one point that was super, super weird that nobody liked. So they stopped doing it that way. And so they just kind of did it this way, and this is their bread and butter. So this is what they do with story modes nowadays with fighting games.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel the same way. Everything is just to get two characters to face off against each other, and sometimes whenever you have the one character, you get to pick between the two characters, the way that they remove the other character from the equation sometimes it works, but most of the time it doesn't. So there is some cheesiness involved, but due to the structure of a fighting game, it's just kind of something you have to roll with.
Yeah, but the one thing, and I think you've touched on it a little bit briefly, is the multiverse. That's the other main game mode in this Injustice 2 that is brand new and just really kind of kicks up that replay value for me. I've been playing the Battle Simulator quite a lot. I was actually playing it when you came over to record.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. Basically what it is because they establish that there's all these different multiverses in the first game. They have this, it's because of Brother Eye, right?
Yeah,
that's how you access it. I couldn't really remember the bullshit reason that you're able to access it. But basically, it's just this online thing where there's new challenges every day. There's a new verse that Brother Eye discovers. Yeah. And so it just basically just an excuse for you to go to this other world or Earth or whatever you want to call it. And you just go through and it's basically, I know you don't play these games, but Mortal Kombat had the Living Towers is what they called it. And it's very similar to Multiverse. And it's just really fun. I really enjoyed playing the Living Towers, and I really enjoy playing the Multiverse. It's just kind of another thing. Ultimately, it's still just a fighting game, but it has all these different challenges, and it's an easy way to get credits and stuff to build up your arsenal of gear and whatnot, and build up your level for these different characters. I will be honest, though, and we'll get to this in Nerd Favorite, if there's not a challenge to play as a certain character, like some of the challenges are, you want to beat this tower. I almost called it a living tower, but you basically want to beat this one with Batman or whoever. If there's not one of those, I just play as Gorilla Grodd.
Yeah.
That's my favorite character so far. So it is pretty cool, though, that they have all these different challenges. I do struggle with the challenges, like, don't jump in this map, because I'm always jumping. So sometimes I'm not great with those challenges, but I do just really love the multiverse quite a lot. And that's one thing that with Injustice, the first one, like you said, it's just like you play the story and you're pretty much done, especially if you don't play online, which fighting games online are just ridiculous. Yeah. So I usually, as much as I love fighting games, as much as I have confidence in my fighting game ability, I still don't even, like, I feel like that would just be me having a fucking not even a panic attack, just like a rage, just a big ball of rage, because I'd be so angry playing these games online, so I don't even bother with it. But this was definitely a plus for me, a big plus.
Yeah, I think Multiverse is amazing. I love how it's constantly updating. It's not just some stationary thing.
Yeah.
So the fact that it refreshes and changes, it adds more value to this game. Which again, I mentioned typically these games for me get stale, but this is still fun and it's still exciting and it's different every time I put the game in. So that's a lot of fun. A lot of the achievements associated with game, or not a lot of them, but it's like level up each character all the way, or level up to level 35. And that entails doing a lot of matches. So it's fun to be able to go to the multiverse and earn this gear and play these challenges, as opposed to just being like, all right, well, I got to do player versus player again, so I can level this character up. So it keeps it really fresh. which is awesome. I also have I really like the challenges, and I try to do them whenever I typically can. But like I had one last night, which is don't duck, and
No way.
I like 2 seconds in, I ducked because I
Yeah.
was trying to do one of my combos, and it involves the down button. It's just like, well, fuck that. So
Yeah, I had one the other day that's the don't jump one, and I was like, okay, so I'm not gonna jump, and I don't even think I lasted 2 seconds because that's just ingrained in me.
Yep.
Years of playing fighting games, you don't sit still, you're jumping, you're ducking, you're doing all these other things. So it's just that's my natural instinct in these games is to do that stuff. So it was, even though I said to myself I'm gonna try not to jump, almost immediately.
yeah, there's also they sprinkle into the multiverse matches like some games or some, I guess you would call them towers, like you were saying. There's acid rain, or there's the Batwing is firing down missiles, and you're not only fighting your opponent, but you're like trying to avoid these environmental things, which is really cool as well, and kind of adds another layer to the game. So Multiverse was a really smart and really fun addition.
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't think you put in the gear system without putting something in like the multiverse, because nobody's gonna care to like you said, just be player versus player. I mean, unless you're a big online fighting game guy, which I don't even want to be friends with you if you are, because you're a bad person. But
I've played like 5 online games, and in the majority of those online games, I don't have my mic on because I know I'd say something douchey, but that does not stop my opponent from having their mic on and criticizing every fucking thing I do.
yeah,
It's like,
you
why
should
even-
record that just so we could listen to it.
I might do it. It's bad. It's like, why would you do your super move there? It's like, why are you? Why we're
you're
fighting each
winning,
other.
yeah.
well, like shut the fuck up. It's bad. It's worse than like Halo. The people that are playing online.
All right.
Sorry if you play online on Injustice. Maybe just turn your mic off.
Maybe that guy is listening right now. He's like, this is his first episode. He's like, oh, they're reviewing this game that I like to play. I'm pretty sure I played that, asshole.
Yeah, he was very critical of my fighting style. So
That's hilarious. I'm sorry I missed that.
Yeah.
So the last little segment that we're going to talk about, and I kind of combined two things. That one is the graphics and the sound. For me, I mean, the graphics are just absolutely amazing. The cutscenes just look ridiculous.
Oh,
like
yeah.
I love that we've gotten this far in video games that they look this good. I will say, and I said this a lot in my walkthrough videos that I did on the YouTube channel, which you should check out if you haven't already. And maybe it's just my own bias because I hate the character, but the Superman, whoever does his mocap or whatever, his acting, he just looked like he was just trying to hold in a fart the whole time, like the entire time. It was really, really bad. I did not like his acting at all. It bothered me because I kept forgetting to look it up, and I eventually did while I was taking these notes. It sounded like Tara Strong did Harley Quinn, and she did, which I thought was really good, because I was like, either that is Tara Strong or that's somebody doing an impression of Tara Strong doing Harley Quinn. So I was glad that they got her for it. I don't know if she did the first one. I'm sure she did, but yeah, they got pretty big names for a video game, like Kevin Conroy did Batman, obviously. So I thought that was pretty cool. They got some pretty big names.
Alan Tudyk is Green Arrow.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool, even though I wasn't crazy about some of his one-liners. I thought it was cool that it was him. Who does the Joker? I don't remember it being anybody big.
Not Mark Hamill. So
No, I was surprised that maybe I know they're coming out with Red Hood DLC for this game.
Yeah.
I was surprised that they don't have Troy Baker in this game. I don't think he does the voice for anything, if I remember correctly from the 20 seconds of research I did on this. But yeah, so maybe he'll do the Red Hood stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see because obviously he does good stuff. But yeah, the graphics are just absurd. The facial animations are some of the best I've ever seen. So it is really great.
Yeah, and I mean, like we said, the area transitions are really cool. The super moves just look amazing. I mean, pretty much everything is top notch. Like I said, it doesn't surprise me because this is the studio that, again, made all the Mortal Kombat games. So they made all their money making a fighting game. So, yeah, it doesn't surprise me, but it still kind of blows me away how good they are at it. So, All right, so that's pretty much it as far as that's all I have for Injustice 2.
Cool.
All right, so star rating.
I'm going to give it 4 stars.
Yeah, I'm going to give it 4 as well. I kind of went back and forth between 4.5 and 4. But like I said, ultimately, there's some nitpicky things here and there that I didn't like. So, yeah, 4 stars. Like I said before, kind of teased a little bit before, our nerd favorite this week is just kind of continue with the Injustice 2 conversation. I'm going to kind of combine 2 different questions. I want to first talk about your favorite fighter in the game, and then I want to talk about your favorite super move, and it doesn't necessarily have to be mutually exclusive. Like, I mean, you can just talk about your favorite fighter and then your favorite super move, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that fighter's super move, or you could do it however you want. I don't know why I'm laying all these ground rules on you.
Like, let me take some notes here on what the rules are for this nerd favorite real quick so I can remember.
All right, so I've already kind of blew my load a little bit with this question, but my favorite fighter is Gorilla Grodd, which is funny because I think it might have been last episode, or maybe it was off the air, so to speak, but I mentioned to you that I didn't know really anything about Gorilla Grodd as a character. I have been reading The Flash, and apparently he is a Flash villain.
Yeah.
But he hasn't come up in this run of Flash yet. I mean, as a character that I knew of, but I didn't really know a ton about him. And so when I was first playing the game, I'll be real honest with you, with my Let's Play walkthrough videos, I made myself look pretty stupid most of the time because I don't know that much about DC characters. I think at one point it was brought up to me that I said that Supergirl was Superman's sister, which is not true at all. And I think ultimately I knew that, but I just, because I'm playing the game as I'm trying to entertain, I say things wrong all the time.
For sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I did do that and I apologize. So it's funny that Gorilla Grodd did ultimately become my favorite fighter because I did mention that I really knew very little about the character. But as far as me as a player of these games and just as a fighter, I really like to string combos together, and he is really good for that style. Like, he has pretty easy combos to throw, and he also has a really long reach. So like, you can uppercut them and kind of knock them into the air, and he has such a long reach that you can kind of juggle them a little bit longer than you could with other characters. Also, he has this really fun super move called not super move, special move called Mind Control that actually, the move itself doesn't really do a whole lot for me, but what it does is it knocks the character back and it falls back really far. And he has this other move that I like to follow up like immediately after, that he jumps across the screen and like jumps on top of you and like smashes your head into the ground. Yeah. And those moves really work very well together because the mind control move knocks you back so far that I can jump on top of you, because you have to not only time it right, but you also have to be far enough away from the character to pull off that second move. So I just really like the combination of all those things about the character. His super move could be a lot better, like, because I don't really care that much about the character itself. His super move is just not that great, but altogether, I think he's definitely my favorite character. As far as super moves concerned, and I might be taking yours, I don't know what yours is, but for me, it's easy. It's Flash.
You son of a bitch.
Yeah. I thought maybe you would go with Batman because his is not. His might be my second favorite.
Yeah.
But the Flash is it's really cool. I really like that, the fact that, I mean, even though I'm not a fan of time travel, I do like the fact that there's a little time travel in it with the T-Rex, also the Sphinx. I really think that that's a really, really cool one.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is a very cool one, but I'll pick a different one. My favorite character to play as is actually not the character I'm the best with. My favorite character to play as is Supergirl.
Okay. Yeah, she's a good one.
I really love her moveset and her character power, which is, for Xbox, you hit the B button, is her heat vision, which is super awesome. I love doing that. And there's a move you can do with her where you hold that in the right trigger and she walks towards the person and just shoots a beam for like 3 or 4 seconds, and
I'm quite familiar with that move.
Yeah, I felt the same way when you were talking about Gorilla Grodd's moves. Like, oh yeah, I've been on the receiving end of that before. But it's so much fun to do that. She has a move where she goes from whatever side of the screen, and she comes behind the person and uppercuts them, which is a lot of fun as well.
That's a cool move. I cannot figure out how I do it, but I do it every once in a while, and I'm trying to pull this other combo, and then all of a sudden she does that. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. I should probably figure out just how to do that.
Down back Y, man.
Oh, yeah?
I got it memorized. Yeah, that's one of my favorites. But she's a ton of fun to play with, but I played with her online and got my ass kicked. So not the character I'm best with, but she's a ton of fun. And I unlocked her alternate, which is Power Girl, which
okay, cool.
Is pretty cool to play as Power Girl, too. She's a more grown version of Supergirl. She's, I don't, there was backlash with that character whenever she was introduced in the comics because her outfit is very revealing, but she's a more grown up version of Supergirl. So that's fun to play with her as well. As far as the character I'm best with, I hate to say it because you want to play these games and you want to find the character that is your niche, but mine is Batman. Because same thing with Gorilla Grodd, is his combos for me are really easy to string together. So I find a lot of success when I play with him. But I typically play with Supergirl. As far as favorite super move that is not the Flash's, I guess I'll go a tie maybe between Green Lanterns and Atrocitus.
Okay, the kitty cat.
Yeah, because that's fucking hilarious to me.
I had no idea about, like, I don't even know him as a character. Like, not even like, I am familiar with Gorilla Grodd. I did not know he was even a character. And I was like, why the fuck does he have a cat?
Because they're rage. They're the Red Lanterns are rage, and cats fucking suck, and they're always pissed off. So that's why. And if you know my wife, she is a huge cat person, so she thought it was fucking hilarious that he has a kitty cat that comes and spews stuff at him as his special power. But that character is so funny to me because he's like this big hulking demon type character that's like so
he's got
metal,
a little kitty cat.
but then he has a kitty cat. So yeah, I really like that. It's funny to me, and it almost even makes me want to start reading the Red Lanterns comics because it's just so crazy and absurd that he has a kitty cat that is a Red Lantern. So I would say that his is pretty funny.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So that's it for episode 142 of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast. As always, we really appreciate if you follow us on Twitter and Instagram. They're both at the Nerds Podcast. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Google+. You can also vote for us for Podcast of the Month at podcastland.com. Comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel, which I'm currently doing Let's Plays for Injustice 2, which is the game that we just reviewed. I just finished up Little Nightmares, which is a game that I really, really loved, and I'm making my way slowly through the Mario Kart Grand Prix, which just have turned into just me screaming the entire time, which I suppose can be kind of entertaining, but I lose my shit a little bit with that game. Anyways, you can also check out our Twitch channel, which Tyler does a weekly stream Monday at 9 p.m. Central. And I actually literally right before you came over to record, I tested my streaming capabilities, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and say this, so it forces me to do it. I'm going to also start streaming on Twitch as well on Wednesday at 7 p.m. Central. So I'm just going to stream for a couple hours Wednesday night. I haven't decided what I'll be streaming this Wednesday, but after I do my new comic book day video, I'm going to have dinner with my wife, and then I'm going to sit down and stream for a couple hours every Wednesday. So definitely check that out as well.
What it's worth, we'll be streaming Dying Light for the next few weeks.
Cool.
We'll be starting that Monday. So the day that this releases, we'll be doing our first Dying Light stream.
Cool, man. All right. So also subscribe, rate, review us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio. Basically, any good podcatcher you use, we're on it. And finally, you could also email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. For Patrick Kuhn,
Tyler Hunt,
we are the Nerds You're Looking For. Take it easy, guys.
Later, guys.